Hello and welcome to season 2 of the podcast. I'm here at our favorite coffee shop in Midtown, and my guest today is
Rachel and Taylor.
Yay! And you are a filmmaker?
Yes, I write and direct and I produce when forced, and I also edit.
Oh, awesome. So tell us a little bit about your background. What projects have you worked on? What have you done? How would we know you?
I'm probably most famous for, well, I wouldn't say famous, but I'm probably most well known for in Memphis, my short film Avarice. It's a 15-minute short fantasy, and I wrote and directed that project, also edited it. Other than that, I've been working on different sci-fi projects or some book trailers and different fantasies around town.
So tell us a little bit about Avarice. What is it exactly?
So basically, it's kind of like a little Alice in Wonderland tale. It has, what's interesting about it is that it has no dialogue in it, because I wanted to tell a story. It's my first film, and I knew that, that was one of the mistakes that a lot of first-time directors make, is that they make it all dialogue. And so I wanted to tell something that was completely visually driven and see if I could tell a story with just imagery. So that was what I decided to do, and I wanted to tell a story about a little girl and her loss of innocence. And so it's kind of this little magical world where she wakes up and there's a fairy light in her bedroom, and it leads her outside and everything's warm and beautiful and they're playing, and then she gets distracted by something that's dark and ominous in the forest, and she kind of knows that that's not something she needs to pursue, but she kind of has this greed in her heart for it, and so she kind of chooses between what's good and what's not, and so the story goes from there.
That's pretty cool. Now, when you say you wanted to do more visually, how did you set about coming up with a script with no dialogue?
I really just tried to make everything that she did very communicate basically what she was feeling, and so everything that she tried to touch, or things that she looked at, just expressions on her face, those kinds of things, or just basically anything that was happening. I tried to use that to drive the story forward. And so there's a lot of, especially in the actual film, there's a lot of communication through just looks.
Okay. So when I write, I typically have to find my characters first, and I come up with some situations, and they interact, and that propels the story forward. Mm-hmm. With yours, it's really just one character, and then there's the light thing, which does take on a sort of character of its own. I should have silenced my phone. But so tell me, how was writing like that?
It wasn't really, I guess it sounds more challenging than it actually was, just because it was, it just made sense in my head. The light, when I tried to characterize the light as much as possible, when it brightened, I tried to make that seem like it was happy, or it was doing something, or it tried to beckon her away from things, anytime she was getting near things that were dangerous. So anytime the light changed in luminance, that was something, sometimes I would have it sink down and kind of look like it, it just lessen in brightness, just so that it kind of looked like it was moody or down. So I tried to I use words obviously to explain those kinds of things while writing, but that was pretty much the gist of it. It sounds like it was complicated, but really it just wasn't. I did it.
Yeah, the main actress in the film, she was a young girl, right?
Mm-hmm. She was only, I think she was 11 when we shot. We ended when she was about 12.
Had she acted before?
She had.
Okay.
She'd been in a few different things. Her experience was beyond mine at that point.
Okay.
So it probably still is, actually.
So she has to interact with a light for a lot of this film. How did you work that out with her, especially somebody so young?
Yeah, when I saw the picture, I was looking at different headshots for actresses, and when I saw hers, I just knew that she was going to be the one, and I was just praying to God that she would be able to act when I auditioned her, and so I designed the audition to kind of reflect what she was going to have to do in the movie. So there was no dialogue in the audition. I created a situation, and then I changed the situation several different times just to see what, how much she would change her body, how much she would change, the way that she, walked or presented herself. And she was the one who did the most. She was very dramatic in it, but not overly dramatic. And so I knew that she would be able to express herself through just her body. in her face. And so that was kind of how I approached that. And then I just knew she was going to be able to handle it. And so when we actually got on set, the direction from there, I knew her so well at that point, because we'd spent a lot of time together, like going to the zoo, and I just got to know her, and I understood like what made her tick. And so I used those kinds of things to create scenarios for her. So not everything on set was like, that you're feeling sad because the light is, it wasn't like that. Like I actually say like, this is like a science project that you're trying to figure out, or, different things like that, because I knew that was what she would respond to. So.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. That's one thing that I kind of feel like I need to grow more with, is working with actors and figuring out how to convey that kind of stuff. That's really cool that you could do that. And then she also, at some point, there's like a double of her, right?
Yeah, well, did you say devil or double?
Double.
Oh, yeah, it's just kind of a devil version of herself. Yeah, she plays two characters. She's a girl in a white dress and also a girl in a black dress. And she's in this forest, and she sees a dark, kind of ghostly version of herself walking through with the object that she wants. And so it's kind of like a representation of, the inner self, or the darker side of her that exists. And it's kind of trying to lure her in farther to the darkness.
That's cool. So how did she work? You had a second actress play that part, right?
We did. We had a stand-in.
And how did that work?
So basically, it was really simple, actually. Like anytime we do over-the-shoulder shots, we'd have the double stand-in. She had very similar hair, and her, we had her wear the dress. So over-the-shoulder shots were really easy. And then anytime that they were both on screen, you just make sure that it's like simple television,
right.
Like when they do the doubles there. You just make sure one's on one side of the screen, the other's on the other. You shoot it 2 different times, and then you composite the 2 together.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it was pretty simple. She had somebody to act off of, and so, and she's a pro. Like, actually, I kind of think she nailed the darker girl even more than the lighter girl. Like, I love that dark character that she was able to portray.
Did it ever occur to you to just have 2 different actresses, or to get twins or anything like that, or was it just not doable?
I remember when I wrote the part, and I didn't even think about how I was going to do this, like, just because I was such a new filmmaker, and I was just creating this world, and without even imagining like how to execute it. And so it wasn't until we were casting, and I'd already cast her, and it was like, I think it was a week or 2 after I'd cast her, and it suddenly dawned on me, oh my gosh, I need a stand-in. And so I had to go back through and look at all the different actresses that had auditioned and choose, somebody that was most like her, which I had Michaela House do that, and she was just fantastic. So
speaking of going from writing to execution, what was the process like to, number one, when you wrote it, did you already have like a crew in mind and people in mind, or was it just like a brand new thing?
I looked at Avarice as my film school, just because I didn't have the money to go to film school in general, and I had enough money to make this film, and so I really did not know what I was getting myself into. Like I knew enough to be able to direct a film, because I studied so much of that, like just on my own, but the way that this movie actually happened was my friend Dan Baker was the producer for it, and so I pitched it to him, and he kind of gave me some tips and guidelines on how to actually make this happen, and so I really do believe that he took my idea and helped me push it to the next level. So he was one person that helped me find crew in Memphis, because I didn't know anybody, and so he was really the one that helped me get started with that.
Okay. And then what was the process like? Because it's it's very visual, both in the fact of just shots and effects, and it looks very visually stunning. And what was the process like of actually getting that?
Well, I was so obsessed with like Lord of the Rings and all these fantasy films as a kid, or even as an adult, really. And I knew a lot about like fantasy characters. And I didn't realize I knew as much as I did, and I made a lot of mistakes like while filming it. But I knew how to have like something there that wasn't actually there. And so that was kind of I had like eye lines and that kind of thing for Haley to be looking at, and basically I had to create the character of the light for her, and I I would, since it was a silent film, I was able to talk over the camera since we weren't recording any audio, and so I would actually guide Haley through like the different beats, because there were a lot of beats in each of the shots.
Right.
And so I would tell her what the light is or what the light's doing, or is it getting closer to your hand right now? And so that really helps a lot. And I think if I'd done it again, what I probably would have done is had like a little fake light, or like a little green ball or something on the end of a stick, and like kind of rehearse it that way. Like that was one of the only things that I kind of wish I'd gone back, or wish I'd done differently. But I don't know if that fully answers that question. But
So what was the actual production like? How long were you shooting for? We
had 4.5 days of principal photography, and about, well, this is embarrassing, we actually had about 6 pickup days.
No.
Yeah, so it was only a 5-page script, but it was so dense without any of the dialogue. And so it actually ended up being a 15-minute film. So, we weren't really prepared for that. And also it was my first film, and so it was kind of with the understanding that I'm allowed to make mistakes, I'm allowed to see, where I need to go back, and basically I'm allowed to waste a little bit of money and time because it was mine. So
Sure. Well, that's the best way to do it then. So when you, because you said you did not go to film school, so a lot of the ways that I kind of learned filmmaking and writing and all that was just by watching all the special features and commentaries on DVDs, and watching, and really paying attention and really deconstructing scenes and movies. I would imagine that's probably similar for you then, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I probably seen the behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings more than I've actually seen the movies. Like, that's my favorite parts. I love the behind the scenes stuff.
Do you think, speaking of like film schools and stuff, I mean, do you think that's even a necessary thing anymore?
Honestly, I probably would have argued no a few weeks ago. I think I've heard some panels recently where people have talked about, going to film school and it being like a very valuable tool for getting their film career started, not necessarily because of the education, but because of the contacts you make. And I do wish that, I had more contacts starting my career, but at this point it probably doesn't matter. And there's not a lot that you can't learn online or in books or from other people that
That's one thing I do, like at least on Sundays especially, as I sit around watching videos on lighting and all, just everything, just because I don't know, I kind of feel like film school now is sort of just a communal thing. We all kind of learn on set, in working with people that kind of, like you said, allow you to waste time and make some mistakes here and there. Because, for the most part, most of it's pretty cheap to do now. You got a DSLR and a few lights, you can do pretty much anything. And
there's no better way to learn from making mistakes.
Yeah.
And so, you'd rather make mistakes on a lower budget movie than, a film college. Like.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So where did you film most of Avarice? Was a lot of it had to have been green screen, right?
The ending was a lot of green screen. And that was mostly because it was, mistakes while shooting. Just because, I couldn't go back to a lot of that stuff. But mostly, like the girl's house outside was this house in my neighborhood. And it just looked like a little fairy doll house, and so that that was why I chose that. But the girl's bedroom was actually this loft inside this old church, and it was just absolutely disgusting when we found it. Like the walls were white, like there were dead pigeons everywhere and pigeon poop, and it was just so nasty. And I had an amazing production designer who literally transformed that room overnight, except for of course the pigeons and such that had to be sanitized. But the other locations. We had the downtown brewery for, we call it the little Ash Church with all the Ash people in it. And so there was that, and that was just a really gothic, interesting location, which originally I had written kind of more of a wooden building, but when I saw that, I knew that it would be a lot better, going ahead with the brewery. But the very end sequence, I had this idea, and this kind of evolved over time, but I had this idea that I wanted her to be walking down this like kind of cement like hallway where there's all these chalk drawings on all the cement, and for some reason that just wasn't really working out very well. Just drawing it on the cement, it wasn't a good idea to have the artist do that the day of, just because it was going to be very intricate work,
right?
And so we decided to put it on panels and just take the panels down to a drainage ditch and film it there, which in hindsight what I wish I had done was shot on sound stage, because after I eliminated the cement walls, there's absolutely no need to be in the drainage. But that was in my backyard, so that's where we filmed that part.
That's that's one of the fun things about, you know, not having a budget for a film, or having to you just have to get creative, and anything you can think of is, you know, sometimes, you know, I almost think it might even be more expensive to do something on a sound stage. Yeah. You know, if you can just go to your backyard and find a location. Now, the original ending was different of Avarice, wasn't it?
It was. Actually, I had the ending with the girl dying and the light surviving, and it played really, really well with audiences when we had the script reading. But when we filmed it, it just kind of fell flat. Like, the purpose of the story wasn't really clear, and it just kind of seemed like this little girl that does a bunch of like bratty things. She just, all that happens is she dies in the end. She gets what she deserves. And so it just wasn't really that fulfilling. And so came up with the idea to have, the light sacrifice itself for her. And so therefore she does live, but she also kind of gets more of the sting of what she's done because somebody else died for it. And so we had to go back and reshoot the ending, which everybody was very, very gracious about. So I feel very fortunate about that.
That's funny. What are those phone calls like when you have to call people and, hey, we're going to refilm this?
It turned into kind of a joke. Like, oh, you're still shooting Avarice. Ha. When's Avarice going to be done? And, I didn't care because it was my baby, and I was going to do whatever I had to get it done.
So how long did it take from first day of principal photography to actually being done?
3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of that was because, again, didn't really plan very well for the special effects. Just because, Dan was going to be the person who did that, and it was a really big job. And I didn't know that getting into it because I didn't really understand effects. And so, he didn't have the time that he needed to be able to just do that. Like, that was a full-time job.
Right.
And so he was working, 50-hour week at another production, place. And so it wasn't until he went freelancing, and then we did a Kickstarter, or actually we did an Indiegogo campaign to raise money to help, support him while he's able to do that, so he didn't have to take any extra jobs. And so that was how we finally got it done after just kind of 2 years of stalling. Really.
Yeah, I mean, it's tons of visual effects, but I think at the end it turned out really, really well.
Yeah, we're all really proud of it. I think it was definitely worth the labor.
So two questions. Okay, so first of all, the way I kind of got into filmmaking was I feel like I was too naive to realize I couldn't do it and shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And with something the scale of Avarice, I mean, do you feel the same way? Or
yeah. I mean, I honestly, now when I'm writing, I think, okay, well, I understand what I'm going to have to do to actually, make this a possibility. So I try and write, so I can actually film it a little more, which I know you're not supposed to do, but I'm also, an independent filmmaker who doesn't want to take 3 years to make another 15-minute short.
Right.
So, I mean, that's kind of a blessing in disguise, I guess, but
does that limit your creativity, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. But I think also it's a good challenge, because if you give yourself like kind of, constraints, or, like a smaller box, I guess, to work in, but to have to try and figure out how to be just as creative within, your limits, then I think that can make you even more creative, like you're using what you have. And I think there's always a way, it may not be the, the inflated idea that you had to begin with, but it might be even better if you're having to, kind of scale it down or figure out something that's just, more doable but more creative. Yeah, if that makes sense.
I think, one of my problems was after I made my first movie, I wrote tons of scripts with car explosions and ridiculousness that, of course, you could never film, and not without millions of dollars. And
maybe you'll be able to do one, but you'll never see your car again.
Exactly, right? And and then. So I feel like, I finally learned how to write on a scaled down level. But I think what the good thing about that is that your characters get better, because in a scaled down thing, I mean, it relies almost entirely on your characters. And I think that's kind of the cool thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one I'm writing right now, actually, like, I had a lot of different effects. I kind of let myself just dream. I whatever I want can go on the page until, I start having to kind of hone it down a little bit more, and then trying to figure out what can be a practical effect, what I'm going to need to be hiring somebody out for, and then, a lot of it does fall back on her, because what she does is basically, I try to make her do things that, will advance the story without creating another effect, I guess,
Right, yeah.
So...
That's funny. I was listening to a commentary once, and it was one of the guys that wrote the Star Trek movies, and they were laughing because they, when they were making the show, they had to count how many laser beams they shot, because each one of that cost, $1,000, $2,000, whatever. And then they were excited when they got to the movies. They were like, "Great, we can have as many as we want." Well, nope, they cost twice as much in a movie, so they had to count it again, you know. But I try to keep that in mind, too. And I don't even use really visual effects as much. I mean, is there stuff that you write and you just go, no, that's got to come out, I can't do that?
Yeah, this last one, I've had some ideas and I had to change them, and just create something that's a lot smaller. But I mean, that doesn't necessarily bother me, though, because the story, as long as the story stays intact, it might have been a really cool idea. I mean, with Avarice, there's no way I could have scaled back and kept that same story, because the light was an effect itself, but the story that I'm creating now, it's based on people, so there are no effect characters, so I feel like I can still keep the story intact without having to create I'll probably have a few interesting effects, but I might limit myself to just one major effect on this one. So.
What if you could go back right now and redo Avarice, what kind, or I guess the better way to say it is, what do you know now about filmmaking you wish you would have known when you were making Avarice or before?
Let's see. Gosh, it was a long time ago. I guess really when I look at Avarice, I notice some of my shot selections. I kind of, I think that if I went back and created a different shot list for it now, I think some of them would, be pretty similar. I loved some of those shots, but I think that I probably would have a very different shot list. And when I shot Avarice, I don't know why I did this. I don't know why it didn't register to me, but my shot list was mostly mediums and wides and a few close-ups, but not really. I had no inserts at all in my shot list, and that was one of the things while editing. I'm like, okay, I need to see what she's doing, and so I had to go back and get mostly inserts, so or just really close-up shots or and that kind of thing. So I think that if I went back, that's what would end up changing, but it's still pretty good for a first film, I think.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I mean, I was really impressed by it when I saw it.
Oh, thanks.
So what are you working on now? You're writing a new film.
Yeah, I want to do kind of a thematic trilogy. And so, Avarice was kind of my part one. And now I have kind of a part two. It has absolutely nothing to do with Avarice, but I feel like it's kind of the second part of this story. Kind of how Edgar Wright and his ice cream trilogy thing. So this one is it's called Soulless, and it's about another little girl, but she's a ghost who's trapped inside of this house. She's actually chained to it, and her job is to learn souls. And her only mission in the story is she wants to escape, but then something starts to haunt her in the house that's preventing her from doing that, and so she has to figure out what that is, and story takes off from there.
Right.
So,
how far along are you in that process right now?
I've had a couple rewrites. I just got feedback from a couple people that I really trust, and so I'm in the middle of writing it right now, and so I'm hoping in the next 2 months or so to have that completed.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you had a Indiegogo campaign. What do you think is the I guess the lifespan of crowdsourcing now? Is that still a viable option? Do you see that diminishing anytime?
I don't know. I say I'll never do another crowdsource project, but the day that I realize I don't have any money for my next film, I'll probably be right back on there. I think people are definitely really tired of it, and I think it's a lot harder to get people excited about it and to find perks that it would be people would be willing to actually donate for it, especially there's one I actually donated to recently that had James Marsters in it, but I'm a really big fan of him, and so I'm really excited to donate to it because I I'm excited to be part of that project, and I'm also excited that I'll, basically I bought my DVD.
Right.
But like on a lower scale, like the Memphis film community, for instance, I think that we're all doing that, and we're all really getting tired, and I think that the resources are starting to run dry a little bit. I mean, so I don't know. I don't know what the lifespan's going to be for that. I mean, I'll probably keep trying if I have to, but one day I would love to just move away from that entirely, because I feel like personally, you're draining your audience. But I mean, at the same time though, I think you could also be really exciting them too. So it's kind of a catch-22.
I kind of feel like you can get away with that for 1 or 2 projects, and then after that, it's kind of like, you got to find ways to make money off of those projects.
I agree.
Yeah, because like you said, I mean, and I don't know, I don't know how exciting these films and stuff are to people outside of the filmmaking community. I don't know if the average person really cares as much about.
I don't really know if they do either. I think that anybody that at least my projects, I think anybody who has supported them has cared about me, or cared about our small community in general, or advancing Memphis. But outside of that, I don't know. I had a few donations from like Australia.
Wow.
So that was, I mean, I didn't know anybody there either. I know people in New Zealand, but I think I had like a $500 donation from Australia. Wow. So I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. Yeah. It's a very broad world.
I think we're kind of in the gray area now. Like the initial excitement's gone, and so I mean, it's hard for me too sometimes to donate to when you pop up in your Facebook feed, it's like, well, this person lost their legs, and their house is about to be foreclosed on, and this dog needs all this help, and then you've got somebody who's like, can you give me $20 to make my movie? And it's
especially since it's turned into like the GoFundMe. Like that one, I feel like that has brought a new culture to the whole like crowdsourcing, just because that's such a great need when people get on the GoFundMe.
Right.
I know what you mean. Like it is kind of, I mean, it's a different world, it really is. But
I do like though the way you're talking about, like you bought your DVD basically when you did. I think that is a pretty cool aspect.
Yeah,
it's basically, to me, that's like taking pre-orders for an album or something. Is basically what you're doing. It's like, hey, give us this money now, and then you'll get the product later. I don't know that you can. I don't know if you can actually make any money doing that, but maybe I don't know. Maybe
I think you can. It just depends. Well, it depends on what your product is. Like a film, I mean, it's just so expensive that I'm not sure if you can or not with that. I mean, I haven't really crunched numbers or anything, but I do know I bought last year on Kickstarter a passion planner, and it's basically this agenda, actually it's like an agenda on steroids. It's absolutely amazing. It has everything really, really blocked out to where, your schedule is just perfectly organized, but it also has like really inspirational sections to it where you map out your passions, and you create like a roadmap to your dreams. Anyway, long story short, I bought that through the Kickstarter, campaign. And so like you basically, the tiers were, how soon you get yours. But she used all of that money to, make the planners. And she was actually, I think she's like 23. She was really young. Wow. But I think she made a killing off of it just because, like so many people wanted it. So,
sure.
So I think something like that you could probably make money off of. But, a film's a different beast entirely.
Right. What do you think the future of filmmakers, especially like us, people who are, number one, I feel like there's so many more filmmakers now because it is cheaper and easier to make this stuff. And I think we're all, I don't know, I feel like we're all trying to figure out how the hell to monetize it and actually do anything with it. What are your thoughts on that?
I've always wanted to have like kind of a smaller, like a small following, but kind of a devoted like following, and then be able to travel with my film and, kind of create like this big event around it. And so I've always wanted to see if like something like that would work as far as like making money, but again, you have to like build up a fan base that, and that's going to take years. And so, it's like that struggle of figuring out how to get people to get interested in your stuff. And so then just figuring out what am I giving to them that's going to make them interested, or, like kind of, it's a give and take relationship. And so it's just, once I think you get your fans, I think that you could probably figure out ways to monetize your films. But I think that I think that the real struggle is just to get there, get all those people interested in following.
Yeah.
But and after that, I think that you could probably tour around with them and make money off of events. Like I always had this idea, especially with like my fantasy films, like to create kind of like this wonderland, like kind of this artistic, world that you can like walk through and experience like the actual films as if they like burst from the screen, and then like have different showings of like maybe the shorts and stuff. So I've always wanted to do something like that, and that if it was like I had enough money to invest in it, that could be something that actually made money rather than just like, hey, come out and see this film,
right.
Like come out and experience this event, and but
what's your dream project then? If somebody from Hollywood came in this room right now, what would be your dream project they could offer you?
Till We Have Faces.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to direct that. It's a book by C.S. Lewis, and it's a myth retold about Cupid and Psyche. And it's very, like, the two main characters are female, and it's a very, very interesting story about, the main character, Aurora, actually, I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but she's like a very, very ugly sister, but she has this girl, or her sister. I think she's her full sister, but she's just a beautiful, like, goddess-like creature, and a god actually comes and swoops her up. But her sister doesn't believe that any of that actually happens, and so she has this like kind of obsessive love about her sister Psyche, and so it's basically kind of about how her obsessive love is just torn to shreds, and she has to actually look in the mirror at her own face. And so I always thought that was just such a beautiful, interesting project. And I think it's completely unfilmable in the sense that, like, Lord of the Rings was not really filmable. And so I think that, it would have to have, like, a great adaptation. But, that's always been kind of one of my dream projects, just because I've always wanted to do something on the scale of, like, Lord of the Rings. But, maybe something a little more artsy.
Right.
So.
I don't even know if I could handle something that big. Like,
I'm sure I couldn't, but I'm going to try.
Yeah, well, that's good. I think I'd be scared to death to even...
Oh, I'm scared to death.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I'm scared.
I know the last Indie Memphis Film Festival, you were on at least one or two panels.
I was just on one. I was on the female filmmaker panel.
So as a female director, do you think your filmmaking experience is different from, say, mine, or... Is there any...
I don't know. I mean, I don't see it as any different. I think, I've definitely heard a lot of stories. I experienced a little, I guess, but, I think that sometimes, it is a boys' club, and I think, I actually read an article about all the crap that women have heard, like, just from different, like, men. I think my favorite one was this one woman. She was the writer and director of a project, and I think she's the producer too, but her husband was like a co-writer, and he wasn't really, as involved as she was, obviously. And she was meeting with one of the producers, and he wouldn't discuss anything with her. He said, "I'm sorry, I'd rather wait for your husband to get here." And she's like, "Okay, do you not realize I'm, the director?" So I definitely think there's, crap that happens. And, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if there's, as much level of respect, being a woman versus being a man. But I also kind of wonder if maybe that's because I'm not projecting myself, as confidently as, I could be. So, I don't know. It could be in my head, or it maybe it's not. But I think that there is definitely a gender gap that needs to be closed.
Too.
But, do I experience that? I haven't experienced anything incredibly, like, sexist or anything, right. I guess. But
well, every film set I've been on, it's definitely 75% at least male. I don't know why that is necessarily. I don't know if it's just because, I don't know. Filmmaking can get a little techie. Yeah. Even for my taste. Like, I'm not a tech guy, really. I don't really want to know how all those cameras work and all that. I'd rather have somebody else that does. I wonder if that's part of it, is just, basically it's geeks, instead of working on cars, we play with cameras.
It could be. That was something that kind of, because I didn't start filmmaking until I was 25. And the reason was because I was very scared of all, that technical side of it. Like, it's not something my brain really understands. Even now, like, I struggle to process a lot of it, like, I have to work at that. Like, story comes naturally, like, there are certain aspects of, directing comes naturally, just like, directing actors and all that stuff, and even like shots and things like that. But, as far as like understanding exactly where I would need to set up my lights to create this mood. That's not something that I really understand. You know, like I have to really work at it to get there. And so I think maybe, I mean, you know, there are probably more men that are more interested in the technical side, but I don't know if that's necessarily, you know, because that's what we've been told, you know, society, like girls like this, boys like these things, you know. So I mean, I don't know, maybe that's something that will start to close, especially since, you know, we're trying to encourage more girls to get into, you know, filmmaking and just, you know, whether you're being a DP or director or writer, you know, just you do what you know you're interested in doing.
What are your goals, like, as a filmmaker? I mean, it's, of course, aside from making millions of dollars off of it, but, you know, what...
Yeah, I guess, you know, you get so lost in the trying to get there, you forget what they are. My goals have been, I really just want to tell great stories. You know, I want to connect with fans. I want to, I get so excited over movies, you know, like there are a lot of people hating movies right now, you know, like it's just kind of fashionable, but I am not one of them. I love movies, and I love to get excited about them, and I love to connect with, you know, the people who created those stories. And, you know, I think it's a connection to something higher, you know, like something, some like truth that we're all trying to tap into, or you know, or the lack of truth, or you know, just whatever comes out of those stories. And so that's something that has really affected me in my life, like growing up, and, you know, every day, like that's where I find meaning is in stories. And so that's kind of something that I would like to inspire in other people. And so I would love to create these worlds that people can go to and just like feel like they're there and really experience and get lost inside them, and question things about, you know, about life, and try and better yourselves, I guess, and better myself. But
Great.
I'm rambling now.
So what advice would you give to young filmmakers or first-time filmmakers?
I read a lot of books, listen to a lot of advice, and then just do it.
There you go. So where can people find out more information about your film projects?
Right now, I am partnered with Piano Man Pictures. So you can find my film Avarice online for free at pianomanpictures.com/avarice. Otherwise, Piano Man Facebook page or my personal Twitter page will probably be something good to follow.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. And if you want to know anything more about me and the stuff that I work on, you can go to richardalester.com. Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.